So I just wanted to welcome you here. If you haven't been here before, this is the River Center. This is our headquarters of the Westport River Watershed Alliance. You're sitting on a map of the watershed, which starts all the way up there in the front door in Freetown, and goes all the way down there to where you're sitting on Horse Neck Beach. And this is actually, it's a scale map. This is one way that we kind of get across to the public that a watershed is very much bigger than a river. And it's the body of land in which all the water drains into the river. So welcome to the River Center. Behind you we have fish that we've caught in the head area and down in the harbor, which are two different salinities. So this is just another way of showing, how diverse this particular estuary is. And if you haven't ever been on our website and you love the fact that you can see everything from an amazing perspective, we have a film that we made all from drone about the Westport River and all of the magic that it is. And the marshes are just really something if you've never been up 400 feet to see what that looks like. So those are all free on our website. Feel free to check them out. But I'm really glad to see everyone here. We're a little nervous that we wouldn't have an audience, so thank you for allaying our anxieties. But
I was worried there wouldn't be parking.
Yeah, I went to the presentation last week, and I loved hearing about it. I can't stay tonight, which is why I went last week. But I want to say that it's going to be really nice that you'll be able to see the slides tonight. All right, so if you need a restroom, they're upstairs on the second floor. There is an elevator if you need that. And they're composting toilets, but they won't eat your life, don't worry. And welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb, for that introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Theo Wheeler. I'm the Assistant Town Planner here. I've met some of you, some familiar faces, some of you have yet to meet. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. I just wanted to introduce Justine Lee from Boys Boat Group. She's going to be presenting about the Barrier Beach draft plan today. This project and this plan is part of a grant-funded contract through the Office of Coastal Zone Management and the Office of Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness. These are both state-funded grant contracts. So I just wanted to give that brief intro. Town Planner Michael Burris is not here today, so this is on behalf of him. Sorry, it's a little choppy. So thank you, Justine. I'm just going to kick it off. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I've met a few of you before. My name is Justine. I'm here in partnership. We have Serpent here as well. So there's a bunch of Serpent. Can you guys raise your hands in the back? So if you look over in the back, we have Serpent with us as well. So we've kind of all had our own little pieces in this puzzle. We've talked with a ton of community members and we've gathered feedback. And one thing that's been interesting about this plan is that we're focusing on three major sections. We're looking at town beaches that face public roads. So that is why Charing Webb is not included in the plan currently, but there is talks about in future stages, including Charing Webb. These areas are dynamic barrier beaches and they buffer inland areas from storms and flooding. They provide essential habitat, and additionally they support public access and recreation. So they're important places to the community, and we know that. This project took what I like to call a two-tiered approach. So if any of you, and I do recognize some of you who came to our meeting on Wednesday night that George helped organize, that was on the Beach and Dune Restoration Feasibility Study. So that feasibility study looked at these large-scale potential projects, most of which included beach and dune nourishment. And I think one of the takeaways that we can all agree from that meeting was definitely that some of those larger scale projects are quite expensive. So when we think about that, that's not the only tool that we have in our toolbox. And so that's one tool. Another tool is looking at the management approach and the organizational approach that we're taking. So the Barrier Beach Management Plan sets up guidance to improve the day-to-day management of the beaches. It also looks at storm damage prevention and response. So what are things we can do to prepare and respond better post-storm? And it also looks at doing these in a way that are compliant with regulations. So for a little background on myself, I love rules, right? So not only am I a coastal scientist and a resiliency planner, but I love a good rule. So while Connor handles these large-scale beach and dune nourishment restoration adaptations based on his background in coastal geology, I love digging into the regulations and kind of talking with the town's municipal staff and seeing how things are done and kind of pulling the pieces together. So what's the purpose and intent of a Barrier Beach Management Plan? Well, we want to understand the existing conditions of Atlantic Avenue, Beach Avenue, East Beach Road, barrier beaches. We want to provide clear coordinated guidance for things like overwash, storm damage, and we want to look at cost-effective nature-based shoreline management and actions that are consistent with regulations. This plan that we're working on right now, that we have in draft form that will come up to the public later in the fall, is looking to have a dual audience. It's looking to not only work with town officials and improve coordination between town departments, but it's also looking to the public to explain why certain practices are done and the logic behind them. I think we can all agree that sometimes when you see something done and you don't understand the logic, you're like, well, why are we doing it that way? Is there a better way to do that? What's going on there? So part of it is also to explain, you know, we have a monkey map. Why is it placed this direction? Which way should a beach path opening go? Which way should sand fencing go? These are things that maybe we also think we have an institutional understanding of that might not be the best way to manage something. So the goals of the plan are to ensure that we're complying with those regulations. I've said that 3 times now. That's really important to me. I know that's not the piece that everyone's super excited about. To coordinate, to inform the public. One thing I want to highlight with these goals, as I've said it now twice, is nature-based solutions. So in our world of adaptation approaches, thinking about how we adapt a site to better respond to storm conditions, there's kind of a spectrum. There's engineering solutions, which we call the gray end of the spectrum, and then there's nature-based solutions, which we also call the green end of the spectrum. And so when you look upon that spectrum, you kind of think to yourself, okay, what can I do in this area? And not every tool works out of that toolbox. So an example is seawalls. I wrote a whole thesis on it, so if you want to talk about seawalls, I'm happy to talk to you about them at any point. But the idea that a seawall is our best protection in every situation, right? I come from the Cape, we have lots of seawalls ourselves, and everyone will always say, well, let's just put a seawall on the property. That will fix every problem. But in every coastal environment, that's not always the best solution. Sometimes it cuts off habitat. Sometimes it actually increases erosion. Sometimes it causes waves to deflect and causes an issue in another place. So I can get into any of those things as we move forward, either questions if you want to understand them further. But these are kind of the things that we're looking at. Nature-based approaches are green approaches. One reason I think a lot of people do love a nature-based solution is it's consistent with what's already there. It seeks to mimic the environment that's there and to enhance the environment that's there. All right, so as we went through plan development, we looked at existing conditions. Some of those things were going out and doing site visits. We collected sediment samples at every beach. We went and did a wetland delineation at every beach to look at what coastal resource areas were there. And we did a bunch of different studies, including looking at tides, bathymetry, etc. All of that is included and detailed in the plan. We also have a review of beach management best practices. So this looks at, and we're going to get kind of into the nitty-gritty of some of those practices today, but this looks at, okay, what do you do if you're going to do vegetation planting? You might think to yourself, Justine, you plant it in the dune. You put some beach grass in the dune. Well, my argument would be, how far are you spacing those beach clubs from one another? What area are you doing it in? Are you including any other species? What time of year are you doing it in? So these are all things that we detail out in clear guidance, time of year, what materials you should use, etc. So that if someone goes to do the practice, they don't have to go and search the internet for what the best option is. I am a digital native, I'm a true millennial. I found the internet very confusing in terms of guiding me to use a product. I want to know what the best sunscreen is. I got to go look at 20 different websites and everyone's telling me something different. So this guidance was not only developed using existing documentation, and I'll show you which documentation we used, but this project also had the benefit of being funded by Coastal Zone Management. And what that meant was we had access to the top level state guidance in officials to help us guide into management practices. And all of that was done through a grant, so through a state funded grant that the town helped get this past spring. I think it technically was selected last fall. In addition to that, one thing we're kind of in the process with now is also developing recommendation strategies. So these are things such as small projects the town could take on to improve what they're doing at the beaches. And that's one thing I'd love to hear from feedback from you all today. If you have gripes, concerns, questions, I want your feedback to help us to develop these recommendations. Some recommendations can be small, like, hey, why doesn't the town host a beach cleaning every year? It'd be a great opportunity for the community to get together, to reduce the amount of litter on the beach. Well, or maybe the town wants to invest in new machinery that will help them do a specific task along the beach. Hey, maybe you should invest in movie mats in this selected location. These are things, recommendations we can also put in the plan. These are really nice because they're also a jumping off point for a lot of communities on where to get started. I'm of the mindset of not looking at what has happened in the past. I'm constantly about like, okay, how do we move forward? How can we find new positive things to do? What can we do to better the town moving forward? So that's kind of the approach we take with the recommendation strategies. Town officials, the public, recommendations from us. None of those are things that the town has to do. None of that section is saying, you absolutely have to do this. They're just ideas. And sometimes they're ideas that the town can take and then run with and apply for another grant. So those are kind of ideas that if you have it in documentation, I also love writing grants. I truly love it. It's a creative exercise for me, but it's really great when a town goes to apply for a grant if they already have a plan in place that says community feedback says we should do X. It provides a foundation to enable the funder to understand the community has already identified that this is a priority. And part of that is we also look at existing plans that have been developed for the town in the past. All right, so when we talk about those best management practices, some of it, and I said we have some established ideas that we think are correct, and I can pause on this slide. I'll just let myself breathe. But best practices versus what to avoid. So a big hot topic in every town, I'm also on a traveling roadshow, I do a lot of these beach management plans, I love them, but is a dog policy. This is controversial. I don't currently have a dog, but I understand that many dog owners would love to be able to take their dogs to the beach. I'm totally in favor of that, except for about 2 months of the year in certain locations where there's nesting plover habitat. I'm not a huge bird person. I'm not coming here to push a bird agenda on anyone, but I do think most of the time, the areas where the birds are also sensitive coastal resource areas that it's okay to block off anyway. We really don't want dogs and other animals trampling on our dune vegetation. So some of these things are just highlighting, also coordinating, what are the time of year restrictions? I'll use the town of Hull as an example. Their current dog policy is April 15th, and the public was like, what happens if we start it earlier? Well, Mass Audubon said if you start your fencing earlier, the birds might leave sooner. And you're like, okay, we'll start it earlier then, right? You have to, we can talk more about the birds as much as you want, but you have to have it open for a certain amount of time because the birds can reestablish, they can fledge. I can talk more about how the regulations interact, but I don't want to bore you if you're not interested. Another great one, a community member asked me at the end of the Elephant Rock meeting, what about my Christmas tree? Should I put it on the dune? Has any of us ever heard of this before? Yes. No, don't put your Christmas tree on the dune. I don't want that. So a big thing, a big misconception is that putting Christmas trees or clippings or anything else. This is actually along Atlantic Ave this spring. It's helpful. It is not. Please don't do it. It's because not only do those clippings or trees or vegetations potentially suffocate the grass, they can also introduce invasive species into the dunes. And so again, these are one of those things, not everyone might find this that interesting, but I do. That's a really small action that can help maintain that beach grass. And beach grass, I can talk about it more, is an amazing defense, an amazing stabilization tool in keeping our dunes and sediment in place. Another thing that is a big topic, especially along East Beach Road, is the redistribution of overwash materials. I say that, but that was recently also a hot topic along Atlantic Ave and Beach Ave. It's also a conversation. Why are we maintaining the path? What do we do when material washes over? Spoiler alert, barrier beaches want to roll over themselves. They want to migrate. It's part of their natural function. But we as humans love putting infrastructure on barrier beaches. So part of our job, part of what Connor looked at in his feasibility study too, is can you adapt the infrastructure? This is just the beginning of that conversation. Multiple people asked at our meeting on Wednesday, should we have the road there at Atlantic? Should it be there? That's not for us to say. But it is for us to say it is incredibly vulnerable. There's not a lot we can do to totally protect that resource. And the community should talk about, do they still want to have a road in that middle of that barrier beach? It's not for us to say. We can tell you the conditions of what are going to happen potentially in the future. If I had a magic 8 ball about like what year it was going to happen, I'm so sorry, I would not be doing this. I'd be living on my private island. But I think it's important to know those conversations are important and they have to be community-led. I can't tell you to remove your road. I will say I do work on projects where we do retreat infrastructure away from the beach. That is called managed retreat. The relocation of infrastructure away from vulnerable areas. We commonly know it as just raising homes, but it can look different in different places. I personally think land swaps are a super interesting topic. The idea of swapping an inland property for a coastal property, allowing someone to move to a safer location. A very complicated topic and also a very sensitive topic. I think part of what's hard about this, all of this material, is that we're talking about places you love, places you live. We want to be sensitive to that this is real and it's upsetting to think about these places changing or being under threat. So some of these things I'm talking about in terms of dune vegetation, relocating materials, the source on Elephant Rock Beach, do we call it Elephant Rock Beach?
Yes. That part right there that was on the east side, those were rocks that were right down by the water, we just pushed up. There's sand up behind it, and that's where we planted beach grass.
Yeah, and which is great. I more wanted to use that as an example of like, sometimes with the overwash material, we want to make sure that we're not planting it on beach grass, which is what George is saying.
Right.
But we also want to make sure, and this was a big topic, and we can talk about it more at the end if anyone has any questions or wasn't able to go on Wednesday, is along these barrier beaches, they are sediment starved. If we want to improve the resiliency of these dunes, we're going to need to bring material from off-site. We can't just use the material and move it around in order to improve resiliency. So I can talk more about that, but again, today is more about the management practices. So, any questions about these 4 things, or anything I've talked about so far? I promise I'll be more room at the end. Yeah.
Dune nourishment, what do you recommend for that?
Great question. So dune nourishment, we're going to go into the specifics of that at the end, but you want to be able to make sure that you use the same sediment composition that's already there. One nice thing about this study is we went out and studied all that sand for you at these 3 locations. I have sediment curves for every single beach that shows you what type of grain size would match that sediment. So what's nice about that is if you own a property that's in a similar area, it would also help you establish what type of material you need. But I'll tell you, sand is a hot commodity. I don't know how to get into the sand business. If anyone knows, I'm happy to invest. But sand is a precious commodity these days. All right, so I said, well, I didn't say it explicitly, but I'm very clearly a dork about this. There are a few foundational documents that we work from. One is there is a guideline on barrier beach management. It doesn't say everything explicitly of like, this is how Westport, this very unique place, should do its activities. Rather, it provides some guidance on how practices should be done. So that's one of the tools we used. We used applying the Massachusetts Coastal Wetland Regulations Manual, and I can come back to this slide if anyone wants to look up any of these resources. That's a really interesting one that it looks at each resource area individually and what activities are allowed in that resource area. So for example, there's a little bit of rocky intertidal shore at the level, which is kind of, think about like a rocky environment where little organisms live. You can't put sediment like you wouldn't have do in a rocky intertidal shore because it could suffocate microalgae or the critters that live there. So the practices you're allowed to do in each resource area differ depending on their type. We have guidelines for the piping plovers. Again, I can come back to that if anyone has any questions. And then we also have these CZM Storm Smart Coast Program fact sheets. I have a few copies up at the front. They might have already been stacked, but if not, I'm going to go through them in detail. And I have links in the presentation so I can share that with anyone. These detail exactly, at least for these 3 activities, how they should be done. All right, so, because we're all so motivated, we came out to a Monday public meeting on a beautiful evening when you could be grilling at home. What can you do to help? So, not everything costs money. You can help in smaller, easier ways. Stay on the paths, use designated walkways and beach access points. This might seem obvious, but I go to a lot of places and I also turn into that like cranky person when I'm at the beach. I just watch people trample dune vegetation constantly. And I'll tell you, you can ask my colleagues as well, we often have to walk in the dunes to study them, and we walk around like crazy people because we were like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. The easiest thing you can do is stay off the grass. Respect dune plantings and fencing, so we don't want to go in fenced areas. We are going to talk about in a minute how to improve our fenced areas. But I know Elephant Rock already does this. Plant dune grass. If you have areas where you can potentially plant dune grass and it will grow and stabilize, dune grass also grows down. We're going to look at that in a minute, but it also grows across. It's incredible. Give wildlife space. You know, those shorebirds and other species rely on these dunes and spaces. Keep it clean, carry out your trash. Again, this sounds simple. I go to beaches and people are just leaving their trash. And people then, one big thing we hear is, well, why don't we put some trash cans out? Well, trash cans really increase your predators. So they're also not a great thing to have at the beach. And then you have people feeling like they should just dump their trash there. And then it's an issue for the highway department. In my world, everything has a cost-benefit analysis to it. Nothing's a silver bullet, nothing's gonna fix it completely. It's all kind of this patchwork of management and everyone participating in the process. Give us feedback on the draft plan. Like I said, if you found out about this meeting, well, first of all, put your email on the sign-in sheet, we will contact you. But you found out about this, you'll find out about the draft plan, give us feedback. Redline it. I was a high school science teacher. I've redlined a few tests myself. I can take feedback really well. I wrote crew in college. It's a miserable mean sport, so you can give me all the feedback you want, okay? And spread the word, keep talking to people, keep encouraging them to come. We did apply, I'm gonna talk about this at the end more, but we did apply for another grant to keep this project going. And what that means is we're gonna keep on our roadshow talking about this with people. And so if you have suggestions too, like, hey, you should really go to this event. You should really be talking to this group of people. I think the big thing for me, which probably seems obvious, I want everyone to be able to access the coast. I want everyone to be able to go to a beach. I grew up in Barnstable, I had incredible access to public beaches. It obviously shaped what I do today, but I think everyone should be afforded that opportunity. So also I want to be able to let Westport residents know too, who might not currently access the beach, where they can go and how they can access. So beyond these everyday choices, I'm going to highlight a few most effective practices to kind of get your brains going on what I'm talking about. So dew nourishment. My friend in the front already asked. So dew nourishment is interesting. It absorbs wave energy and supports sand movement. So if we add sand to the dunes, right here, what's going to happen is as storms come and as waves come, they're going to wash that sand off the dune, and it's going to nourish our high tide beach where we like to recreate. Some of it might blow over. That's why we're going to get to the sand fencing and dune grass. But that nourishment helps the system and also helps our recreational beach. It also helps improve the resiliency of the dune. It makes it more stable to protect the assets landward of it. The disadvantages are dew nourishment can be very expensive and it's sacrificial by nature. It is not going to stay there forever. It might disappear in 1 week. It might take a few winters to go away, but you're going to need to do it on some sort of repetitive basis. One thing that's important is thinking about the design of the dune. We look at this 3-to-1 ratio. That's one of kind of our key ratios that we like to use. When we're in plover habitat, the ratio that Natural Heritage likes is a 10-to-1 ratio. So it's an even gentler slope. Again, not everyone might find this interesting, but it's all detailed in the plan. Because you might want to know, what am I allowed to do? How steep does it have to be if I design a dune? Enhancements, it's like toppings on top of your ice cream. You can put that salt-tolerant vegetation. You can put sand fencing around it. I know Elephant Rock already does some of these things. Because you will see if you do those two things, it helps that sand that you've invested in stay in place for longer. And we love a good return on our investment. Habitat investment, we want to make sure that sand dunes sit landward to avoid marshes and nesting areas. We want to make sure that we limit equipment traffic. We don't want to be driving equipment over the dunes. In some projects you have to. So if you look online, there was a big dune nourishment project in Marshfield, Duxbury, also a CZM funded project. They had to blow through part of the dune to get the equipment material onto one location, but then they restored that one piece of dune. But they also used a construction access point further north. Actually, might have been east. North. They tried to use a construction access point that didn't damage the dunes as much. So we can kind of do this dance where we look at how to minimize our impacts. Permitting, this is going to require a Wetlands Protection Act, so it's going to require an NOI, depending on a notice of intent with the town to get an order of conditions. It may need what we call a NISA filing, which is with Natural Heritage. So the best thing is to consult my friend Chris Capone, town conservation agent. Maintenance, regular, you're going to need some machinery. So there's some investment here. This link, when I share it with you, is those smart fact sheets. Questions about dune nourishment before I move on? Yeah.
So if you nourish the dune or reconfigure it like Elephant Rock has just been, it is done, what do you need equipment for?
So the question is, what do you need equipment for if you've already done the project? You don't need it at that point. We mostly need machinery for the construction process. Great question, though. Yeah.
So I've got about 400, almost 500 feet of snow fence we put up.
Yeah.
After we put those 18,000 plugs in. We got 12,000 more plugs on order for around November 1st to put in, to finish the beach. Should I put snow fencing, I know it captures, during the winter it captures a lot of sand. Should I put snow fencing all the way down?
All the way down the beach? Yeah,
the way I have it now.
yeah, so George was asking, do I put more sand fencing in? If you have the sand fencing, yeah, I mean, sand fencing, if it can capture sand, you might as well try.
Those 3 storms we had in '23 and then the 2 in January of '24 took out all my fencing. One storm just
Well,
over.
depending on the storm, we would argue in some locations, you take out this, if you know the storm's coming, you haven't had enough time, and you can pull the fencing out, I would.
Okay.
Because it also creates a debris hazard.
Oh, yeah, it was
Yeah,
pieces all over the place.
yeah, so let's talk more about that,
Okay.
because you would ask about where to put your plugs too, so let's talk more. Yeah.
Question about,
A lot of killing with it.
question about the fact that you want to nourish the dune, replenish it. So by inference, I assume the sand is out in the water.
The sand is
The
what?
sand is moved out into the ocean or out into the water. Is that where it's gone? It's gone somewhere. It's either
Yes.
blown inland or it's been washed out.
So the question is, when the dune, when the nourishment starts to dissipate, where is it going?
Or just just take a dune that's there now, and where does it go? Is it the majority of it go out into the ocean?
The majority is likely going out into the ocean. Some is getting wind blown. So the overwash sand, we call them overwash fans. So actually, if you do walk, or if you look at an aerial photo, especially of the landward side
Yeah.
of Atlantic Ave, you'll be able to see the overwash fans. So some of it gets washed over, that's the barrier trying to migrate landward, and some will get washed out into the system. But that's part of with the overwash material. So as an example, some of the overwash material I think got pushed a little bit to the northern side of the Nubble, right? On the northern side of the road. That material would actually be better served to be, kind of stay in the center of the system instead of getting moved out, because you're kind of giving it away to the sea for free. So that's part of why we want to think about the slopes and everything else, is thinking about, we don't want to give away our material for free, but we only have so much material to set in the system right now. So
That's my
that's
next
what I was
question.
saying.
What is the source of the replenishment material?
Where's the source?
Where
It
is the
depends on what you're trying to match, and it depends on where you can find material. If you look up some articles right now, you'll see that Plymouth has going on what they call the sand wars. They're upset because everyone's coming to Plymouth and just taking up piles of sand and moving them out to the beach.
And some of
So,
it's going other places as well.
yeah, yeah.
But my question is going to move now to the direction of, if in fact, a significant portion of the erosion is deposited in the ocean, isn't that the best source? Because it's the sand that came from the dune.
Oh, that's a great question. If the sand's getting washed out into the ocean, why don't we take that sand? Part of it is because that sand that's out, especially if it's in the tidal flats, we can't take one coastal resource area and transform it into another. It's become its own sensitive habitat. Additionally, the material that washed out to sea might be pretty fine. It might be a finer material, that if we were to place it off the beach, it would blow off quicker. There is, to your point, there is dredging of material, and sometimes dredged material is taken and put onto the beach, but like I said, there's trade-offs. So a dredge also can be expensive. It has to be able to get to the beach area. We often do our nourishing in the winter. You can think out on Elephant Rock, that's a pretty weedy area. There's a lot of questions on, is there eelgrass? Can the dredge get to the site? Is the material compatible? There was a lot of talk about how the inlet was dredged. That material, unfortunately, was too fine to be placed on the beaches. It would have just blown right off and washed right off. And everyone would have been like, well, where'd the sand go? You spent all that money and all that time. But there are places where beneficial reuse of dredge material is used. Barnstable, again, I'm going to keep using Barnstable.
Well,
but-
one of the things that I'm reflecting on is California.
Yep,
Spend a significant amount of time in the San Diego area, and they're constantly dredging up from the ocean and putting it on the beaches, and then they distribute it. So California's kind of a place that very careful what they do,
yep.
particularly when it's environmentally driven. So just, to me, the logic would say the best source is where it went. And I don't know how you manage it, but it would seem like you've got a way to get the sand from the bottom of the ocean
Yeah.
up onto the beach.
And CZM, Coastal Zone Management right now, is looking at offshore borrow sites and testing that sediment material to see if that is a possibility.
Oh, I don't know, that sounds too complicated. I just go get a dredge, and I run it along East Beach, and I pump it up there, and I have some graders.
Yeah,
We get it done.
The
But
issue
we're gonna
is,
study this, and I don't know, is it a problem? It sounds like it is. And there should be a focus on trying to come up with a way to make it affordable.
Yeah.
And get the job done.
no, I hear you.
Hopefully, that's what this study will lead to.
I don't think this is not going to lead to that, I can promise you that.
It's
But
not? What's it
I-
gonna do?
This study is going to provide evidence and solutions for smaller actions you can do. It's also identifying areas that are vulnerable. So we are highlighting in documentation, to your point, it's not the whole solution to the problem, but it's a part of the puzzle. Hey, let's highlight that these beaches are vulnerable. Let's highlight what sediment is compatible. So if they dredge something up and they test it, we know exactly where it could go. And part of the study also explains the variety of grain sizes and what that means. So as an example, no one likes a cobbly beach, right? I don't want to sit my beach chair in a cobbly beach, it's not my preferred. A cobbly beach is actually a more resilient beach. So sometimes the things that we like for recreational purposes aren't always the best in terms of coastal processes. It's also a dance of, for example, if you were gonna put nourishment on East Beach, you'd have to do a mix of cobble, gravel, and sand, because it's all a mix of sediments there. So you can't just take any material and plop it on. You had a question, sorry, you were raising your hand.
Well, yes, I just want to throw an added complication into the mix that beaches are not static year-round. So
Beaches
you've
are
got
not
the winter
static
beach
year-round.
and the summer beach, and the sands accumulate offshore in the winter as sort of a buffer, and then they migrate inland over the course
That's a great point. So we
of
were
the
just
summer
talking.
months.
We were just
So
talking about this with George about Elephant Rock. It's nice to look at Elephant Rock right now. There's a lot of sand washing up on that beach. And what happens is every winter we watch that storm move offshore, and on the summer we watch it move on. I think again, it highlights the dynamic nature of these resources. But if you do nourishment, you're just adding more material, and it will help the resiliency. I'm gonna go into my next one, but we can come back. Is that okay?
Just kind of related, how important is it to understand the natural migration patterns along the beach, and are those documented in the plan?
They are documented in the plan, it's incredibly important. It's important because if we do a nourishment project, we want to know which direction the sediment's moving. So on East Beach, for example, you could put sediment on one end and it would help wash along the whole length. So incredibly important. And yes, it's in the plan. All right, so vegetation. I got excited about vegetation because it is exciting. Advantages, it stabilizes the dunes, it traps windborne sand, it reduces erosion from runoff, it improves habitat, okay? Native plants can be difficult to source from nurseries and require early stage maintenance. George can tell you all about this because he emailed me earlier this spring looking for plants. But there are locations. What's really cool is, and this is in the CZM fact sheet, I did this lesson with third graders recently. They thought it was mid-level cool, but I got excited. I pulled up some turf grass for them and allowed them to look at the roots of what it looked like. And then I pulled out some American beach grass to show them how long these roots are in the rhizomes that go sideways. It's incredible. Just planting this grass can help stabilize that sediment, and it's a huge advantage. It's why places like Elephant Rock are investing in grass. Grass still costs money, but the nice part is that material is a great buffer. It improves the resilience of the dunes. It helps the material stay in place. There's certain plants that we recommend versus others. Some are native, some are non-native. Rosa rugosa is a good example of one that is non-native. We see it in the dunes a ton. It's actually not one of the species we want in the dunes. So these are things, again, we talk about in the plan. If you're going to do plantings, these are what plantings you should do. And then we're happy to have individual conversations if you are a property owner right on the coast and you want to know where should I plant, where can I get materials.
What's the objective of Rosa rugosa?
The root system isn't as deep as you would think on the roads, I believe. I'm not an expert, that's not my area. Guy sits behind me, yes. So if you want my card, I can give it to him. Habitat protection, again, we want to think about how we plant in areas. The spacing of the plantings actually has to be further apart in places where we have shorebirds because they don't like super dense material. Again, crazy, I wouldn't have known that. I also had to do a spade-foot toad protection plan this year. That was even crazier because they burrow 10 feet down. So these species that call our beaches homes are finicky. And so sometimes if we know a rare species there, we need to be sensitive to how we do certain actions. Beach grass planting is one of those. We really only have optimal seasons to when we want to do the planting. Not only do we want to do it out of plover season, but we also want to do it in the early spring. Sometimes you have to water certain species in the early season. Again, all detailed in the plan. And then permitting, it may require approval, it may not. It could be something that you get an annual permit for that you could do every season, I believe. Yeah, again, we have to talk to Chris. And maintenance, you have to regularly inspect for damage. You're gonna have to replace it. You're gonna have some loss. All right, the last one of these that I have is sand fencing. So the plan also talks about sand fencing. Again, I'm not seeing what I said, but it really is because there's different, it traps wind blown sand, it can build and stabilize dune. It also directs foot traffic. I'm sure that it's used in multiple places around town. One place that we talk about adding sand fencing potentially, there's that opening right by the public parking at along Beach Avenue. You know, we could put sand fencing there and put a Moby map potentially. These are recommendations in the plan. And that would help people not walk on the very sides of the dune to allow the dune to potentially heal itself along the edges. We look at these in Westport, dune openings were not a heavy topic. Along North Nantasket Beach and Hull, I don't know if any of you have ever been there before, huge topic. They have like 50 openings. Everyone wants their own opening on their own property, right? So again, this is just kind of an example of how certain topics are a bigger topic in certain towns. Location design, we want to install landward of the high tide. We want to space them a certain distance apart. We want to bury them deep into the sand. And depending on the weather conditions you have there, the coastal conditions, sometimes you go straight across, sometimes a zigzag pattern is better. And some places use sturdy drift fencing. Some you use that thin drift fencing. It depends on really what job you're trying to get done there. Again, this may require approval. It's something I would definitely talk to Chris about. And like I was just mentioning to George, it sometimes can be something you need to maintain, and the plan does talk about. If you can go out before a storm and remove something that potentially could become a debris item, you definitely should. And I think that this becomes an issue too when we think about, you know, we can talk more about storms and hurricanes, but when those big storms are coming, sometimes we do have a little bit of an advance notice. And where I come from, people pull their boats, they think about their docks, so these are all things that also for the town, highlighting areas for them where potentially the highway department could go out, do some of these things. These are helpful. All right, so I'm almost done talking to you, and then I'm happy to take any more questions. What is next? Okay, next we are going to meet with more town departments. We're going to review recommendations and implementing roles and responsibilities, who's in charge of what. We are going to meet with the select board next month. We think it's important to include them in this conversation. We want to get your feedback more on the draft plan. And then as a later stage of this project, hopefully, like I said, we applied for another grant through the Coastal Zone Management Program, the Coastal Resiliency Grant, which would hopefully take this plan into final form and then permit the said actions in the plan. So some things in the plan are bylaws. Things like you shouldn't have fireworks, and you shouldn't have dogs, and you shouldn't have bonfires. Bylaws. Select board. Why it's important that we talk to them. Certain activities are things that we would permit under the Wetlands Protection Act through an order of conditions. Things like sand fencing, maintaining beach path openings, driving machinery on the beach. That's not a huge topic here, but we do have guidance for it. If an emergency vehicle needs to access the beach, we explain that that's allowed. We also talk about, there was the whale that washed up. We might need to drive machinery on the beach. These are things that we need to clear in advance so we don't get an enforcement order from Mass DEP. So those are things that we would permit under the plan. And we would develop a timeline and assign responsibility for priority actions and integrate management practices into annual operations and budgeting. So some of this is signage, improving coordination, but we've met with stakeholders, we've met with the beach committee, we've met with all these different groups, but we have more people to talk to. I haven't talked to the highway department yet, I haven't talked to the select board, I'm stubborn, I will talk to all of these people. So, I'm happy to take any questions, it can be small, it can be big. I don't have the presentation material on the big dune and beach alternatives, but we can get you that plan once it comes out in the fall, and I can answer some small questions about that. That's not my main area of expertise. Questions? Yeah, George.
So after the storm in 2023, 24, the storms, I had to go to the Conservation Commission and apply to do work on the beach.
Yep.
And I had Sean Leach from the Beach Commission. He's an engineer and he wrote up a plan and applied for everything through the town and then through the DEP. And that actually took about 3.5 months.
It's a good point.
It took a long time.
George is saying this process is not quick. It takes many months for these things. And then, George, who else did you have to apply with?
National Endangered Wildlife people, all
Was
that.
that quick?
No.
No, that was also not quick. So part of this work is also just highlighting that this doesn't happen quickly. And so some of these things might not feel critical, but I want to make sure that you have policies in place for when that hurricane comes.
Well, it's 3 years. And so I still got 1 more year, so.
Well, and that's
I'm
the
not gonna
point.
close out those order conditions until it expires.
So George's point is well taken. He's saying I still have another year and then it closes out. So you
Yep.
do have to reapply.
Yep.
But one thing I will highlight, and I think Elephant Rock is working hard to do this, part of the reason why the bird rules are in place, right? Dogs weren't allowed on Elephant Rock, were allowed, and now they're not allowed, and people ask why. Part of what's really important is that you need to maintain a good relationship with Natural Heritage and the Endangered Species Program. They are one of the bodies that approves your permit. And so what you need to do with Natural Heritage is you need to show that you're minimizing and avoiding impacts to rare species, that you've a proven track record of that. I have a community on the Cape, I won't name them, they weren't doing that, and they had a take where a dog killed one of the plover chicks. And they, well, first of all, they tried to say it was a coyote, but we're dog prints. Mass Audubon is very good at what they do. They are a year away from needing to do a large-scale dune nourishment project. If they're not showing a good track record on trying to mitigate and avoid impacts, Natural Heritage is going to say, well, how do I know you're going to mitigate and avoid impacts when you do your dune nourishment project? You can't even do it on an annual basis. Yeah.
So should George, in another year, just automatically reapply?
He'll
Just try to
start.
keep it going?
So the question is, will George reapply? Knowing George is very organized, he probably is already thinking about that. So
You
once
just try to keep, so you can keep.
you keep the ball rolling, yep, and you renew your permit and you talk about what you've been doing, and that's again, you have to show the town you have a good track record of following the rules. And I think one thing that I'll say is I'm finding in some communities, there are some places where people just did stuff without a permit and they're like, well, why do we have to get a permit now? Well, that's just how rules work. That's how it rules.
But so if he reapplies, you don't have to wait that 3.5 months, right?
Yeah, well, you have to
Right.
wait, but it doesn't feel like it's pressure. If you
Oh.
do it in advance and you know it's coming, and you know you're gonna wanna continue to maintain the beach and do the same activities, you're not stressed or not able to do something because you don't have a permit.
I mean, it's like a forever thing. If you want that beach to go, you're gonna have to keep doing something.
Yeah, yeah,
Clearly.
yeah. But the permit almost acts as an opportunity to also have a discussion about the management practices. I'm sure that also during that process, Elephant Rock learned a lot of things about oh, we should really be doing it this way, and our sand fencing should face this way. In a way, it's not meant to be this kind of bad thing. It's more a tool for kind of dialogue and communication.
Well,
Yeah,
anytime you're dealing with a town or a state or certainly the federal government, it's, you know, time and paperwork.
time and paperwork, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Big beautiful dunes are very inviting for people to play on and slide on, kids and sometimes not so small people. I'm thinking of what I see daily at Cherry Webb.
Okay,
There used to be a couple of little signs, at least telling people, so it makes it easier to teach people.
yeah.
There are none now. Why are there none? There should be several signs along the path. On the ocean side, there's never been any. And it's just an open invitation for people to play on every day.
What was your name? What's your name?
Ted,
Ted. Ted was saying, I'm just repeating in case anyone's watching online. Ted was saying, why don't we have signs at Cherry Webb? Don't slide on the dunes. Ted, beautiful point. One, I think one thing that came out of the public feedback from this phase of the project is why is Cherry Webb not in this plan? And I think when it moves forward, Cherry Webb needs to be included. It makes sense, any of these management practices, the sand fencing, the vegetation, any of those things, it's another town-managed beach, it would be good for it to be included. One thing that I will include in my notes from tonight is a recommendation on improved signage at Cherry Webb. That's something that we can document in this plan. And when I say things can start to get included into annual operations and budgeting, you can have a line item about signage and, we have sign pollution, we call it in some places, where we have too many signs, but we also have places where a little bit of signage should help. I know we talked to Ross at the Land Trust, and we talked about how at some places we probably just need improved signage about the dogs, and that would help people understand what season they are and are not allowed there, or the dunes. I'm in the business of sign making as well, explaining why we want to stay off the dunes. I'm thinking about the big, I don't know if anyone in here has been to Wellfleet, but we have the big coastal banks there, right? I can't tell you how many times I see people crawling on them. It's not helping, to your point. But sand fencing is actually a really helpful tool to keep people away from those dunes.
and Cherry Webb is the most heavily used beach
It is?
the town has.
I gotta admit, guys, I haven't been to Cherry Webb yet, but I have heard a lot about it, and I need to get there.
Let's put up a billboard.
No billboard, no more sign pollution, but I'm with you, and I'll write that down, because that would be something we'd say, increase signage, whose responsibility is that to get that started, and that's a great thing. I think some of these items, I'm hoping the beach committee can take it and run with it, and we can talk to the select board about why it's important, and some of those things are things you can get grant funding for. It doesn't just have to be the town paying for all of those things. Smaller items are easier to acquire funding for. Yeah, good question. Yeah, I'm glad.
One area where the town is actually still destroying the very beach is on Beach Avenue.
Yes, sir.
Now, I remember, I was, the reason I got involved in this, is that I was on the stewardship committee of the Land Trust, and each of us on the committee had a property that we were supposed to monitor,
Okay.
and I drew Beach Avenue.
Okay.
Lucky me. And I'm probably the only person in this room that's been threatened with jail time for protecting the beach. But up until about 25 years ago, Beach Avenue was not regularly maintained. It was oftentimes it was blocked off with rocks. Sometimes there was a gate. And that was about 25 years ago when the town, in its wisdom, decided that it had to be maintained.
Yep.
I don't recall the reason.
Yeah.
And so they came in, the town came in with a faulty survey and started to clear a 30-foot roadway. There was maybe up to 3 feet of sand in the road. And the problem was that as your drawing of the 3-to-1 angle proposed indicates, when you clear a 30-foot flat road, the land on either side for 4 feet high, 12 feet away, erodes. And that was land trust property.
Yeah.
And me being the monitor, I thought I had to do something about it. And I made my opinion very clear. And eventually, we had the state come in and reduce the width of the road, the major, I didn't really have a lot of support by other groups in the town, quite frankly, at the time. And so they did reduce the width. And then the result was that the present situation is that they have the timber guardrails. And that actually is helpful because the sand is filled in and the beach grass is grown.
Yeah.
So that there's no longer the 3-to-1 angle of repose, there is the beach grass and the barrier. But the far end of the road is still plowed out regularly
Yes.
by the town.
Yes.
And the sand is dumped on the cobble beach on the north side.
Yes.
Which you said is harmful to the environment of the cobble beach, is that what I
Not
heard?
necessarily harmful, but there's a better way to be doing it.
Well, but the point is that the road should obviously be closed.
What is your
There-
name?
Woody?
You're going to jail.
I wanted to say Woody, so I know you didn't feel support at the time, but I will say, so Woody was asking about, especially it seems like the eastern section of Beach Avenue. I can tell you, I mean, you can see Constance in the picture with her board,
But
her
he
board
wasn't
pictures,
that far out.
right?
He was way back.
From the minute we started this project, I have been hearing about Beach Avenue. So a few things that this plan does do in terms of highlighting the vulnerability of Beach Avenue. It talks about that eastern section that you're talking about, which is Barrier Beach, opposed to the rest of it, which isn't mapped as Barrier Beach.
And you also showed a sign, a picture of the relatively new opening through the dunes.
Yes.
In the town owns 100 feet of beach.
Yep,
And so the town decided to break through the dune. Now, in the first big storm, that opening will be made much wider. And a lot of the dune that's there now, vegetated dune, will be destroyed because that opening is there.
so I have heard,
And it'll fill the road in that spot.
Yeah.
And it'll destroy the dune for many feet on either side.
so a few things. The plan does highlight, so when you kind of look, I know it's a little hard to see, but you kind of see almost this area that looks sandier. There's part of this area that's marked as Barrier Beach. It's the eastern section of the road, almost kind of from where that opening is. So that section right there, and there's that public parking,
Yeah,
which is right there as well.
there's the gap.
Yep. So a few things. The plan highlights the Barrier Beach resource area. It highlights the current vulnerability. It highlights how expensive it would be to do a nourishment project there. It provides a lot of evidence and documentation to the things that Woody has just mentioned. One conversation that we've just started having, and I think will be a through line through the rest of this process, we've talked with Sean from the Beach Committee, we've talked from Ross from the Land Trust, we've talked with others. Again, I'm just here to make a recommendation, I'm not here to throw anything at anyone. But it is, could you pilot a gate kind of where this opening is and relocate the ADA parking? Now, one of the next things I need to do is talk with the accessibility, it has an acronym, thank you. It is to talk with them and see where would they like the parking to be.
Yeah,
Where
about, about 200 feet. The road, if you go west from that opening, about 200 feet, is where the road goes from 40 feet to 30 feet.
Yeah, right here.
Right.
And there's a, now back, way back,
Yeah.
before the
But
barrier.
we can also see, to your point, these barriers are doing their job, but I was there and I saw about 4 cars turn around just in the time that I was
Oh,
there driving with
absolutely.
you.
And they're not handicap cars at all.
Yeah, no.
They're not supposed to be there at all.
I think that this conversation is one that has definitely been brought to the top. I've heard, even with the gate though, I've heard a lot of sensitivity about wanting to maintain a section of Beach Ave, which is still available and open, but potentially, and I've heard that gate is not a word that we like. I've heard many different things from many different people. I think your point and your observations of the site are well taken.
Yeah, Mike Sullivan did propose an excellent plan, actually.
Yeah.
Back at the time, 20 years ago, but it was not approved by the town.
Why don't they just put it halfway?
And I think his plan would have gone a long way to solving any problems that you have now.
Yeah.
And it should be resurrected.
And I think one step to that is could be looking at managing the site differently to start. Like maybe we don't go 0 to 100, maybe it starts small and it's allowing the material to migrate over. It's not maintaining a certain road width here. It's small things, so.
Yeah, well, it's maintaining the parking spaces at the end.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
That is the problem.
yeah.
And there's no way to solve it unless you abandon it.
And I think that's a conversation that, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. If anything, I have heard that,
Yeah, I mean, I just think that that's a no-brainer for the town.
yeah. And I
They're
think,
serious about this whole project.
and I think it's good that people keep bringing it up, and I think it's beautiful that the residents here are so passionate about maintaining their natural spaces. And so I think it's come up at every meeting. It's something we'll definitely bring to the select board as a concern that we've heard from the public. But I've heard both sides about not wanting to lose this as a public access and shut down. People don't want to see a gate at the very start of Beach Avenue, which I understand as well.
Yeah, well, the start of Beach Avenue is not the problem.
Yeah,
Right,
we're all
problem is-
talking about the same section of
Right,
Beach
the 30
Avenue.
the 30-foot wide section,
Yes.
Right.
Which I
beyond the
question,
town beach.
actually, give me the cover slide.
Oh.
Ken.
Put the gate halfway, or 3/4 of the way down.
We're kind of almost talking about like here, right? And so,
Well, the place where they can turn around is where it goes from 40 feet to 30.
yes, but I
If you go
do,
beyond that, there's no way to turn around.
one of the plan
And we
also
looked at
has
that.
ownership maps, so it shows that this area is a patchwork of ownership.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've heard as well is, you know, that different owners in this area want access to their, I've heard many different things, but it's not my role or responsibility to make any decisions on that, but it is my responsibility to document the conditions of the site. And we've definitely, Woody, documented what you're talking about. You know, those dunes aren't your healthiest dunes, they want to migrate, you have a sensitive resource area, but we don't have it in this presentation, but I also have pictures from, I think it was 1944, of this area completely wiped out from a hurricane. And it's just,
Well,
you know, so-
44 was a hurricane.
yeah, so it's gonna continue to change and adapt, but I mean, I'm a big proponent, and this is just me, Justine Green saying this, I'm not saying this as like, this is what has to be done. Barrier beaches are gonna wanna be barrier beaches, they wanna migrate and move, and when we try to hold them in place and change them, you know, sometimes we do more damage than good. Yeah.
So I wanted to make several comments. I'm sort of one of the people responsible for getting this grant, and
And you've been at almost every outreach event?
almost. And I just wanted to say, I think George has done a great job at the Elephant Rock Beach
He
Club.
really has.
I've been a member there for all my life, and this is the first time I've ever seen anything done to maintain the beach, really.
Yeah.
And secondly,
Shout out to George.
I think that Woody's point about the east part of Beach Avenue, I don't think it was 20 years ago, but it was almost 20 years ago, that Buzzards Bay was proposing to cut off that part and have a wooden boardwalk most of the way up to the Noble,
Yep.
along where the road is, or was, or will have been, was. And then my other question is, for there as well as Atlantic Avenue, seeing that the normal course of the life of a dune system in a barrier beach is fluctuating back and forth, responding to storms, building back up, responding to storms. Having the road there interrupts that process. So, in the case of Atlantic Avenue, if we really wanted to make that barrier beach resilient, perhaps we should abandon most of that road and let the dune system take over. And it's because in my lifetime, Cocky's Pond, the south end that is accessible by the little drive, has filled in by about 120 feet over my lifetime. And I think it's because, maybe you can set me straight, but I think it's because the road interrupts the natural process. And if the road hadn't been there, perhaps the vegetation and the dune that goes into to the pond area would have captured that sand and not let it all go in and fill that pond in. Do you think that's possibly true?
I don't know, so the question was, do I think that this road is making it so that the pond is filling in? That I can't answer for you, but I can say that,
It's on Atlantic.
Well,
Avenue.
we had two entrances to the pond. We had two, and after the storms, there's two from the beach going down to Atlantic. And we closed those up. We only have a 40-inch wide, and we close that in the winter. We put sandbags in there.
yeah,
Because we lost a lot of material from the beach that went across Atlantic and down into the pond during
Yeah.
those three storms.
Yeah, but those openings weren't there for all my life.
Really?
I mean, and when I was a kid, you could ride a bicycle along Atlantic Avenue and see the ocean. Because the dunes had been wiped out in the 38, 44, 54, 56 hurricanes.
yeah. I mean, the dune is gonna help, a bigger dune is gonna help capture sediment, it's gonna help you with more vegetation, so to that point of the overwash. I can tell you, we can put in, this plan isn't gonna get you a retreat of that road, but I can put in recommendation and language about a furthering study for the removal of the road. The plan is gonna document utilities along the roadway. So a good example of this, it should be online now. There's a managed retreat of Surf Drive in Falmouth where we looked at, what are the trigger points? So it might be that there's a trigger point to the removal of the road, that the community decides, we're gonna keep maintaining it for now, but if it crumbles, we're gonna tear it up and we're gonna restore it to dune. But that takes a lot of community discussion around, well, that's gonna make my commute home 15 minutes longer. So this plan can't do that, but I can say you can explore what that looks like, and maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe you don't need to do that this year either, but maybe it's something you need to do in 15 years. But like we said, with permitting, getting funding, everything else, we're not at least in my experience in most places, we're not in the business of decommissioning roadways. It doesn't happen very frequently. But if there's community support for something and you want to continue to study it and what it would look like, and you'd have to probably do a traffic study as part of it. Like you said, maybe there's no utilities, but we're talking about closing down an 800-foot section of Beach Avenue, and it feels like there's a lot of sides. I feel like closing the road, it's gonna take a lot more discussions, a lot more conversations, but this plan, it will highlight the vulnerability, and that might in the future be a reality. Surf Drive is an example. They're gonna wait, they're gonna maintain it, they're gonna relocate the utilities underneath the roadway while they have time. So they're not trying to do it after a storm comes when their water pipe is destroyed. So in some places it's more pressing, but here I think it's interesting that you guys are even open to the idea of managed retreat of the roadway.
So the question is, well, it's not the question, the difference between the three roads
Yeah.
is Atlantic is a road of convenience. There's no houses on it, nobody needs to use it.
There's a few.
There's a few, where you would abandon it, there's no houses. So Beach Avenue, there's no houses, but East Beach Road, there's probably, 120, 140 properties there.
Yeah.
So that would be a real long-term process to try to retreat from.
Yeah.
But
Any of these roads would take their own, you got a whole other planning exercise on your hands. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. I brought this up, I think, maybe an earlier meeting, but East Beach Road and all that power, power poles and all of that, get washed out every time we have a major hurricane, and that road has been moved, the poles have been moved over the course of years. The power that serves the back eddy, Trips Boatyard, all the residential areas down there, Gooseberry Neck, all come down Horse Neck Road across East Beach. Has any thought been given to dropping a cable on 88, the bridge, underwater and coming into a main distribution box for that
Do you have an
area?
answer to that? Is that-
I do have an answer to
Yeah.
that. you can't put it on the property.
It can't go on an underwater cable.
Well, that's a different thing.
Yeah,
But you could do it underwater. We've been in touch with Eversource, and they say, well, who's gonna pay for it? So, we hope to be meeting with them in the next 2 weeks to see what we can trade off. They wanna put some underground utilities to take care of some of the solar arrays in some spots. And I said, well, what would happen if the town let you do that in exchange for putting a cable underneath the river? And they said, okay, let's have a meeting. So
Well, it's going to trigger a lot of discussion.
it's only been a year and a half, so.
But all the discussion about running the solar line, remember that the effects of magnetic waves to the fisheries, and it triggers a whole different ballgame discussion.
It's not anything to do with that. It
No, I
has to do
understand.
with solar arrays and the, overhead on Horse Neck Road, Division Road, Drift Road, all those places where we have solar farms. And they want to have underground to connect some of these things. Not the whole length of any of those roads, but in this, I think there's a possibility that if that's what they need and we need this, maybe we can do it.
Well,
Question, sand versus pebbles. I mean, we usually like sand on beaches, but what can we honestly expect to be going on in our beaches? I mean,
What can we expect in terms of the sediment characterization?
how often should we have pebbles on the beach, or will they go away? I mean, we stopped going to Horse Neck Beach because it got so pebbly, but Cherry and Webb was fine. I don't understand how it all works.
That's a good question. Unfortunately, that is more of a Connor question, who's our geologist, but my stab at it would be that, the finer sediments are washing away more frequently in the winter and the coarser material is staying more in place. I think it depends
They're
season,
underneath.
or
or
they're
they're
washing up
washing
in
it.
big wave action. I mean, these beaches are gonna change in their characteristics year to year, as we said, season to season, but bringing in sediment material is gonna help potentially increase the amount of finer sand you have. I mean, we're not gonna have Daytona Beach most likely, right? But I mean, I go to places where they're like, why are you only raking the beach 2 times a month? This is ridiculous. So again, I think it's kind of it's a mix. Some of it is because your sediments starved. You're having a lot, especially because as we have a changing climate and changing storm conditions, we're seeing more of that sediment wash offshore and not necessarily come back in. Yeah.
Going along kind of with what Woody said with regard to the east end of Beach Avenue, with the storms that we've had and the sand that has come into the roadway, the town of Westport very nicely takes that sand, puts it on the inside, and then guess what? We just went how many thousands of dollars of dredging in the river? Well, where's all that sand that we just put on the inside of that beach going? Right back into where we just dredged. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a lot of communication or thought process to some of these various activities that all interact.
Well, and I think that's the hope of this planning effort, is being able to communicate with said parties and say, hey, there's actually a different way we should be doing this. Because part of it's even like the Christmas trees. There's an institutional knowledge of how we think something should be done. And there's also a, well, we've always done it this way. But I'm happy to come in and say that there's a different way of doing it. But part of this is kind of, Connor, my colleague, jokes because more of his projects are like these technical feasibility assessments. And more of mine are planning. And he was like, Justine, why are there so many meetings? And I was like, cause we gotta just talk and talk and talk, right? So part of this is talking. And I think the next phase of this project with this draft plan is communicating with all of the different parties. Already through a part of this process, we've talked with the health department, we've talked with the dog officer, we're hearing needs, concerns, wants. So some of these things, I can tell you right now, in Falmouth and Bourne, we're having incidences of stuff we don't want in the water, so the Board of Health has to close the beaches. These are all things that we detail in the plan to make sure we have guidance. But yes, I think in terms of the management, the width of Beach Avenue, how wide it's maintained, what we're doing down there, how often we're regrading everything else, those are big topics that are part of this and going to continue to be a part of this. Yeah.
I want to go back to Atlantic Avenue again, and I'm Bob Paws, by the way, but I've been in the harbor all my life, and very familiar with Elephant Rock. And George mentioned there are two cuts in the dunes, essentially for access. There's some parking at the Cocky's Pond area, and they
Where
allow.
the sailing goes out of,
Right.
where the sailing program runs out of,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
right here.
That's correct, yeah. So it's always been a question of mine as to whether those access points should just be totally cut off and put back to a total dune as everything else is on Atlantic Avenue, and find another way, I guess, to get the access. But if you allow storms, hurricanes, to go through those weak parts of the dune, there will be enormous erosion, as we've seen over the time. And it all fills in the south end of Cocky's Pond. And I've seen it, of course, since '54 Hurricane Carol. And the pond has filled in tremendously. So wouldn't cutting off those access points serve a lot of the purposes you're trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, potentially. I have to be honest, the study mostly about the ocean-facing portions of the beaches. So I do think that's been a hot topic, is this side of Atlantic Avenue. It wasn't the side we were primarily focused on. You have a mix of coastal resource areas here, and the plan the delineation did go to that side, but just the management practices don't go to that side. I mean,
Well, it's
logic.
the management of the dune that goes along Atlantic Avenue on the ocean side.
The ocean-facing portion, but yes, I know exactly the place you're talking about, there's cars on it. I mean, I'm not about to tell you what to do, but yeah, logic would serve, you don't want to be driving on coastal dune, but I would assume there's also a lot of people who want to continue using that as a public access way to the water on that side.
Suppose I take on the ocean side, like 40-inch wide there, the last access point from the beach. If I close that off and build the dunes up there, so we do have a hurricane, hopefully, or storms like we had last year, that it wouldn't wash it away to go across the road and into the pond.
I can make a note, I can talk to the geologists and see, but my logic would say, no matter what, that barrier's gonna keep trying to migrate landward into the pond.
That's what you said last time, essentially.
Yeah.
I thought you said we lose a half a foot or a foot of beach every year, no matter what.
Well, the shoreline change assessment, I would more take as just like highlighting that there is erosion there, more so than.
Plus you have global warming, so the water's slowly coming up.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell the beaches wants to move back.
Well, the ponds aren't my area of expertise, but I can tell you ponds are a big topic among themselves, because I live on a pond. You know, we have eutrophication, we have filling in of materials, they're their own animal. And that pond's really interesting. I assumed it was gonna be very brackish, but it's more of a freshwater pond, so that's just it's its own kind of animal in there. But I'm gonna make a note, and I think it's something we should come back to in further discussions on what's going on with the migration of sand along the landward side of that road.
Well, it's more, what you're talking about here is it's the management of the dune, which has two holes in it,
Yeah.
which are vulnerable during a hurricane to go roaring through those holes, eroding the
the dune ending up across the road into the pond, so.
Yeah.
um,
That would have to be a discussion though with Elephant Rock, because my purview is only about coordinating with the town about what to do on their property. So that's a different management body.
I belong to a group that owns that land,
Okay. But we can talk more.
which is separate from the elephant.
Yes. I have you listed on all my maps. Yeah, we can talk more.
This discussion has been very informed and helpful, informative, but it's largely been about the Elephant Rock area. How are you reaching out and communicating with all the community down in East Beach area?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. We've been talking to them a lot. I got invited to their chicken dinner. I could not attend. I had a wedding to go to. I'm in that season of life. We've been talking to them a ton. So we had an internal stakeholder group, which included a few members from their association as well. We've held, so just in the same way that we went and had a discussion with Elephant Rock and the Nubble on Wednesday, a few weeks ago we went and did the same thing. We met at the Grange.
Yeah, the range.
I got nervous. We met at the Grange, and we probably, how many people did we have today? Did we have like 30 people?
No, it was close to 50.
Well, close to 50 people. And there we just focused on East Beach, just the coastal dynamics. Really one thing about this study I think was a takeaway for me is we lumped all of these resource areas together. But very quickly for me, it really, I mean, the Nubble and Atlantic are experiencing a set of issues, a set of dynamic coastal processes. And East Beach is experiencing its own issues. They have their own management issues that they're very concerned about. Their common questions and that they'd like to learn more about. So reaching out to them has, at times, this is meant to be a combined effort. I think the group we have is leading the discussion, but that has been a huge stakeholder group we've been working with a ton. And we've actually been talking to, I can't remember her name, she's fantastic. The minister of the,
Cheryl?
I can't remember her name, but we're gonna meet with them again to talk about some of these management practices. One big question they had there was, how can we prepare our properties as individual property owners in the winter to help make our properties more resilient? And I think, to your point, to your question, that's very different down there. Well, I thought I had a picture.
What about Horseneck Beach?
Horseneck wasn't in our purview, that's because DCR, but when we think about these properties, right, we look and we think, these sand fencing approaches we're talking about may or may not work in those properties. Vegetation, right, it's a different set of issues, and there it's really dynamic too in terms of thinking about they've had one way that they've utilized their property for a long time, and utilizing their property might look different in the future. So there, I would say personally, I feel that group has been more interested in the discussion of the large-scale nourishment practices. So we needed to get that information out to them, and then we're gonna go back again with some of these smaller scale management practices. But yeah, that's one of the things, how can I help make my property more resilient? Part of that there is, what materials are they laying underneath the trailers? Is that helping? Is it hurting? A big topic of discussion there is how the material is redistributed. So when we look at, this is taken along the western section of East Beach. This is not what we want to be doing with this material. We do not want to be piling it up. Remember I said the green to gray spectrum? We're building our own gray spectrum here. What this is potentially going to have is end effects. It's going to increase erosion. They're kind of building little head walls in some locations, and that's the sediment's not moving the way everyone wants it to. It's just a different stakeholder group in terms of their management needs. But one thing the plan does do is it's consistent in how the town should be operating, how they handle overwash material. Another good example could be rack. So rack is that dark line that washes up on the beach. Normally we leave it, it's good. It's food for organisms, but there are situations where you're gonna have a year where you get a massive amount of rack that washes up on your beach. This plan would enable the town to remove up to 2/3 of the storm-related rack because it can become a health hazard if it just sits in the moss. So, yeah, that has been its own kind of outreach effort, kind of umbrella, but I think one big thing that the town said from the beginning was that while this is a planning exercise in part for the town, they felt that this component of the project was almost its own arm to the project. They want, I'm gonna speak for the town, Dia, but I think Michael and Dia and Chris and others have said, you know, we wanna make sure the community understands why we're doing certain practices, and we also wanna hear things like, you know, should we close up the paths on the north side? George was asking, when should I put my vegetation in? Where should my sand fencing go? People have questions, and we're happy to answer them. I have to say, like, every group I've interacted with has been so positive, wanting to learn, wants to discuss how to move forward, so I've had nothing but positive interactions, so let's not change that, please. Thank you. But I'm gonna let you guys go. I'm happy to answer more questions one-on-one, but I wanna make sure I'm respectful of everyone's evening and time. So thank you so much for coming. We'll be here again. If you signed up on the email, we'll keep reaching out, okay? So continue to hear from us about our next outreach events.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.